to a place called BookLogix in Alpharetta, Georgia, which is a printing company. So when you self-publish your own book, you have to determine who is going to actually print your book. And so today I'm going to go meet the team, and we're going to determine the size of the book. So something else you have total control of that when you self-publish. Now, what goes into the decision of what size the book is? So the first thing I did was look at books that I felt comfortable in my hand. And obviously this is, and no need to explain this, but I'm going to say it anyway, is this is simply for the printed book. You don't have to think about this if you are only doing a digital book. I am also doing a digital book. I'm also doing an audio book. This decision doesn't have to go into those digital items. But since I've decided also to do a printed copy, I have to think about these things. So I looked at books that I liked, and I don't think about it when I'm reading them. Like, I don't think about the size of the book necessarily when I'm reading it, but now when I look back, I think, oh, well, which the books that somehow I just enjoyed holding and enjoyed seeing, or, what size caught my eye. And so that's what today is about. The other thing, the insecurity I still have, which is probably unfounded, but I think because this is the first time that I'm printing an adult book, is I want it to look like a real book. Like, I want it to be thick enough to where it looks like a legitimate book. Now, of course, self-publishing is legitimate, but I'm old enough to where I have been through the phase that self-publishing wasn't real publishing, and publishing with a publishing house was. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, I really, really, in this experiment, want to make sure that my book looks as if it was printed by a New York publishing house, right? Even though I know there's publishing houses in other part of the country. So the size of the book to me also reflects how thick it's going to be. So the smaller the book, obviously, the thicker it can get. And so currently, as I'm going on this trip, I have about 57,000 words written. And if you look up how much those words are in book print form, like, the average 200-page book, it says, is about 60,000 words. And so that was my goal. That was my template. If I can do a 60,000 word book, then the length of the book should be okay. Because I want to make sure, again, that it looks like a real book. And again, that, it's so funny that's the insecurity I have, because it's like, I know I'm doing something that I'm confident in, but at the same time, you still have those voices. And so I just want to address those voices. So that is what's going to go into the determination today. We're deciding what size my book is going to be. And I'm looking toward a smaller size just for, in my mind, the insurance that when you pick it up, it's going to be thicker rather than thinner. So, BookLogix, here we come. So I had my meeting with Evelyn, who was very gracious, and we had talked or emailed each other before this meeting. And during the meeting, she knew that I was unsure of what it was I was looking for. And so she gave me examples of things that we had talked about on the phone as well as through email, which was white paper versus yellowish paper. And that's something you don't think about when you're reading. But I am someone who, when I read, maybe it's my stigmatism, I don't know what it is, but usually the darker the paper, right? The yellowish paper for me, less contrast allows me to have easier reading. So that's why I chose the yellowish paper instead of the stark white paper. I've seen stark white paper used a lot with business books. And so I also thought, well, I'm not doing a business book. It's nonfiction, yes, but it's more of a memoir, so I went with yellow paper. Something else we talked about was size. Like I mentioned to you earlier, that I want to make sure it looks thicker, and she knew that, and so she gave me some examples of the different types of books that they have published in the different sizes, and she was like, she understood me wanting to go smaller, potentially, but she also said, but sometimes it's too small. it doesn't look like what you need it to look like if you go down to a certain size, because little pocket books, poetry, words of inspiration, those are for the very small. And she sent me samples, and we decided to go with the 5.5 by 8.5. Now, she had showed me something a little bigger than that is also sometimes traditional print, but I decided that I wanted to go to 5.5 by 8.5, which is still bigger than trade. Trade is those little pocket books back in the day, and those little paperback books. I'm a sci-fi fan, so a lot of times sci-fi novels, fantasy novels can be in those what's considered to be that standard size, and this is bigger than that. So 5.5 by 8.5. And then the other decision, hardcover, softcover. Well, usually with publishing houses, and it's a big author, a national, international celebrity, they do a hardcover, and then they re-release it as a softcover. So it's two opportunities to make a lot of money. I did not consider myself in that category, so it's like, you know what, we're just doing paperback. And so she gave me the samples of the paperback and hardback. I had already, decided that I wanted to do paperback only. And then she's like, well, is it gloss or matte texture? Something else I didn't think about. And so I chose the matte texture, because with the glossy cover, I associate that more again with business books. Now, that's just my personal experience. That isn't necessarily the standard. Again, I'm not trying to show myself as an expert in publishing. I'm just doing this for the first time, my little experiment, and kind of, sharing all the decisions you have to make. And so in my mind, I thought, well, shiny, again, is not, I just don't see nonfiction books as shiny unless they're business. So I want a matte. So matte finish. And we're doing 5.5 by 8.5. So we made a lot of decisions today, and I'm got that point done. But I tell you, it is something that when you're responsible for it, having not done it before, sometimes it can be intimidating. And so, and I have to coordinate this with other things. So we'll talk about this in another video, but the cover art. And so my graphic designer, while I was there, I was like, okay, well, she needed to know the size of the book to know how to do the cover art. So while I'm in the meeting, I thought, let me not forget to text her and let her know, hey, we've decided 5.5 by 8.5. And so that was one of the things that we had to do. So hopefully this is helping you, or at least, if you're not going to write your own book, it's helping you understand when you read now all the decisions that have to be made, or the things that have to be thought about, whether it's somebody who's self-publishing or somebody who is the publishing house. I mean, this is what publishing houses do as well. So they have all these tools in-house, and they make these decisions in-house. And I know that they probably have a lot of formulas and a lot of data to prove what sells best and what doesn't. I'm not privy to those pieces of data, so I'm just kind of guessing it as I go along. So anyway, thank you so much. Subscribe, and don't forget, I have a monthly newsletter called You Only Have Your Shelf to Blame. So we don't just talk about my books, we just talk about books in general, plus we talk about music and movies and all that stuff. So I would love for you to subscribe to that too if you're interested, and you can find out all the information down in the description below. And don't forget to leave a comment of anything that you would like answered or to share with everybody else. Appreciate you being here. Thanks so much.